you ever been walking through a graveyard and wondered what stories it could be hiding, or which fascinating historical figures may be there? Throughout Brockville cemeteries, there are many graves with markers indicating the person has their own stories and fought for their country, just like Thain MacDowell. One of Brockville's most famous sons is Thain MacDowell. Born on September 16, 1890 in Lachute, Quebec, his family moved to Maitland, not far from Brockville, when he was a child. Thain was a good-looking and popular young man with a reputation for being fearless and a talented athlete during his time at the University of Toronto. But when he was 24, he left his studies in 1915 to enlist and fight in the Great War. When this happened, the local Brockville paper wrote that no man who left the island city was better liked than Thain MacDowell. Thain became a provisional lieutenant in the 41st Regiment, or the Brockville Rifles, in 1914 and signed up for overseas service in 1915 as a lieutenant with the 38th Battalion CEF. After intensive training, he made it to the front lines in France on August 3, 1916, where he was in the Battle of the Somme. As a captain of B Company, he led his battalion against German trenches. As they were making their way across no man's land, Thain managed to get within throwing distance of 3 German machine guns, and they had been hindering their progress. He managed to bomb out the nests, saving hundreds of lives. But during the battle, he suffered from a concussion when a shell exploded that sent him flying. For his efforts, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Order, but after 5 months in the hospital, Thain actually went back to his men and was fighting in Vimy Ridge. Captain Thain MacDowell became one of the most talked about officers in the Canadian Army for the events that led to him being awarded the Victoria Cross. On April 9th, his battalion was fighting at Vimy Ridge and were part of the force responsible for capturing the highest ridge, Hill 145. Thain and 2 runners reached the German line before the rest of the battalion and got separated from the rest of their men. After clearing out the area, they came across a German bunker. Captain MacDowell decided to go down by himself, and as he rounded a corner, he came face to face with a large German force of soldiers. Thinking quickly, he yelled over his shoulder to the soldiers at top, and pretending they were a huge imaginary force, yelled out that they should throw some bombs down. Well, thinking that they had been surrendered, the German soldiers put up their hands in surrender. MacDowell then made the German soldiers exit the bunker 5 at a time so that the 2 runners he had upstairs would not be overrun. In total, Thain MacDowell managed to capture 2 German officers, 78 soldiers, 2 machine guns, and 5 tons of explosives. Despite getting wounded in the hand and heavy shell fire, Thain and his men held the position for 5 days until relief came. For his actions, Thain MacDowell was awarded one of 4 Victoria Crosses that were given out for action at Vimy Ridge, and he was the only survivor of those 4. MacDowell suffered another concussion in the battle, and by June 1917, his men was noticing that he was suffering from something they called nervous exhaustion. So he was sent to a hospital to recover from trench fever. When he didn't get better there, he was sent to a hospital in London where he was diagnosed with neurasthenia. A month later, with no recovery, MacDowell was sent home to Brockville General Hospital. Life was not easy for Thain after the war. He suffered from shell shock and trench fever. His symptoms included being high-strung, nervous, having depression, insomnia, restlessness, and irritability. What we would now understand as a normal response to the traumas of war was often called shell shock and was seen as cowardice. Thain never went back to the front, but in 1918 he was sent back to England only to return to Canada in 1919. Thain then spent time in hospital as his symptoms returned. His doctors reported that he only slept for 3 hours a night, his hands trembled, he was frequently dizzy, and he had a loss of ambition and really had hard times concentrating. In 1919, MacDowell was discharged from the hospital and the Army, and he did so with the rank of Lieutenant Colonel. He then went on to become a private secretary to the Minister of National Defences in the 1920s, and then became a director and officer in various mining companies across Canada. He also got married and had 2 sons, and eventually retired to Nassau, where he died on March 29, 1960. He was then brought back to Brockville to be interred here in Oakland Cemetery. On his return to Canada, Thain was honored many times, and in Brockville, probably one of the best known honors would be the Brockville Cenotaph, which was completed in 1924. On top of the cenotaph is a soldier with the likeness that was modeled after Thain in his exploits at Hill 145. Thain MacDowell's experience was not an uncommon one. Many returning soldiers returned home changed men with no idea how to cope with the horrors they had endured. For many past and current soldiers, war doesn't end when they arrive home. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope that you will join us next time for more interesting stories from the Stones. Thank you.